I'm Corey, this is Fizz, and we're going to walk you through narrative and mission design in Assassin's Creed, with a focus on AC3, I guess. So here we go. Nope. No, we won't. I'm going to have to do it like this. No, it's not working. This is awesome. Off to a great start. I don't even have the mouse.
Yeah, you do. Sorry about this.
Here we go. No. Wow. Oh, yes, okay.
Yay!
Hooray.
Win! So the purpose for us being here is we wanted to basically show you guys the pipeline that we go through to create a narrative structure in AC, or just a story. So it's basically the exchange that we'll have between a writer and a designer and how we create narrative. It's not about mission design, it's not about design per se, it's about crafting a story. Now what you'll see here is a pipeline that we've been using since AC1, so we've been using this on the brand since the beginning, and to this day it helps us. It's not by no means the perfect structure, we're still iterating on it, but it's something that is useful for our team, and we ship the game, so hopefully it can inspire you guys into something else. So without further ado.
All right, so I will start. During conception is when we start to settle on very general ideas. Obviously, the overall time period is chosen, ideally before we move into conception. Conception is when we narrow down, for example, the years during which our game will take place. So we may have a general geographic and temporal location, but conception is a time where we start to get specific. We start to pick cities and various environments. We start to pick our years. We choose our protagonist. We choose our antagonist. I start to do research into some of the potential Templar targets or other allies that you may encounter throughout the game. So it's very general writing at this stage. It's a lot of brainstorming, high-level ideas. And I use these things to create a very broad outline. And it's essentially a bullet point list of large narrative ideas and narrative beats, but it's nothing super substantial at this stage. As we move from conception into pre-production, we do what we call preparing for blueprint, and blueprint is a thing which you'll get to see a little bit in more detail as we go through this presentation. But in terms of my preparations for blueprint, I take this outline I made during conception and turn it into a treatment. And as you can hopefully see up on the screen, those couple of bullet points turn into something that is only marginally larger. It lists sort of the inciting event for a given sequence, a very general overview of some of the narrative events that will occur during that sequence, and then the event that we will close out the sequence on. But as you can see up there, for example, sequence 1 from AC3 takes about 6 lines, and obviously it was a lot longer in the game. So this just shows you that there is obviously a lot of space for Fizz and his team to start doing their job, which he will discuss now.
So on our side, we'll go off, we'll get a couple ideas from different people, but we really, like, it's our brainstorm session that is sort of outside of the box. We don't put ourselves in the limitations of what our engine can actually do, but really what we'd want to see. So for a lot of us, we've been making these games since AC1, AC2. So we sort of grow accustomed to what we have, and every time we sort of list a whole bunch of different mission ideas that we would like to see, and because of time constraints or technology constraints or just like any of the above, we just can't ship it. So we just put that into a document which we call the 101 gameplay ideas, which has been rolling since AC1. And this becomes a sort of like inspirational document where when we go into blank page syndrome, we can just pull out this document and like go through it. It's like, this would be really cool for our new setup now. So we'll take out that document in the start of a project and contribute to it more, inspired by our new era, inspired by the different events that went on at that period, or by the different technologies that we're currently working on. So that's on one side. On the other, we'll actually sit down with the different teams on the project and get their ideas. So for us, I mean, we're isolated in our silo and we're just like brainstorming, but it's really, really cool to go out and actually talk to the different teams, which we have a general idea of what they're working on, but everybody always has like this cool project that they really want to show you or put into the game, and then that will give us like some really cool cues that, okay, we can feature like 2 or 3 missions on just this one feature that the programmers have been working on, or that the world team has they developed this interesting landmark that we didn't know about. Well, then when we're in the brainstorm or the blueprint period, we can actually refer to these quick cues and actually make a mission entirely centered around that either place or feature. And then once we have this list, then we'll go and build a progression curve in preparation for the blueprint. So the idea is that at this point, I'll sit down with the lead game designer and all the different designers and have a list of their features that they're working on, and then basically map out what aspects of it need to be taught to the player to progress to actual acknowledgement or assimilation of the different features. So this comes out to just like a general list, as you can see under the progression curve, which is really approximate. Like, it's not set in stone at this point. It's just to give us a better idea of what order that we'll need to teach players thing, and it's separated more by features than an actual list. And then what we'll do with that one is we'll marry it to Corey's breakdown, his synopsis, where like he went through the entire game and will give us, for instance, like paragraphs describing the different steps of the story. And I'll break it down into chapters, in a sense, which are sequences, and then basically pull out the characters that are introduced in each of these sequences, the side stories that we want to introduce as well, and map a general idea of like what features we want to show, as well as maybe a couple missions that are in there. So that brings up to like the breakdown that we'll eventually go into Blueprint with.
So at this stage, both my team and Fizz's team have created these various lists. And we get together with all of the other team leads in a room, and we build the game on a wall. And this is what we call the blueprint process. And everything goes on index cards. All the index cards go up on a huge wall. We map out the entire game so that it's there on paper. You know, you can actually touch it, although it sometimes falls apart if you do that, so you have to be careful. We build the game in the room together, taking the different narrative pieces, the progression curve pieces, the tools, the abilities, the locations, the unlocks, the characters, everything basically, and we put it all up on a wall. And it's all there from beginning to end, and it serves as a map, as a blueprint for building the actual game. You know, you hear people talk about how they sometimes prototype their game designs in paper. You know, they'll make a board game, or they'll make a card game, or they'll chop up little pieces of paper and sort of playtest or prototype different design ideas. So we do the same thing, but for the entire game. And so once it's up there on the wall, it gets converted into something that looks a little bit more like this Excel. It actually gets made into something even fancier and prettier, which is this kind of thing. This is actually just a small section of a blueprint that was made for AC2, for example. And there's your entire game mapped out in various ways. And there's a whole bunch more of the document that would not fit onto a slide, so you don't get to see that stuff. But this then gets hung up pretty much all around the team area so that people constantly have a map, basically, that shows you where we are, where we're going, what the plans are, and where everything is ostensibly supposed to fit together in the overall blueprint for the game. So once that's up, on my side, when pre-production begins, I start writing. And again, because the missions haven't been fully designed, they are also entering pre-production, as Fizz will describe shortly. I spend my time focused on scenes and events that will not be overly impacted by missions, vice versa. So with AC, for example, this may be working on the white rooms that occur when you take out a target, because we know that white rooms are going to occur no matter what. We have a good idea at this point in time who our primary characters and targets are, what they'll be discussing, what the themes that we're going to be exploring are, and so these scenes are essentially safe. There may be other moments in a given game that we know are definitely going to happen. So for example, in AC2, we knew that at some point Ezio's father and brothers were going to be executed. The specifics were maybe not settled on yet, but we knew that this would occur, so I was able to start writing the scene. For AC3, for example, a lot of the moments where Connor and Haytham are together, we knew they would occur. We didn't quite know the context, but we had a very good sense, or I had a really good sense about the stuff that they would talk about, and so you know, sort of foundation building could begin with those conversations. And then some other stuff that I'll start doing at this time is creating sample conversations, sample dialogue that we will use in the casting process for various characters. And some of these, you know, scenes or monologues may make it into the final game. Other times they may just be used for casting purposes. But again, the idea here is that I am writing to build characters and create scenes without interfering too much with the actual layout or design of the game.
Meanwhile, in the same period, what we'll do is we'll take each of those entries that we saw in the Excel sheet earlier on and make design documents out of those. So they become what we call a mission design document, and those are assigned to the different mission designers who basically become storytellers of their given moment. So they'll usually have a quick synopsis, like that's written in the Excel cell, and then develop on that into creating an actual interactive story of that from that short synopsis. So you usually start out with like a quick description and then a basically bullet point of the walkthrough that you want to bring the player through to go from point A to point C, and we describe basically point B in the middle. And then from that point, once we agree upon the general concept, so between I and the mission designer, they'll go off and build a skeleton so we can actually see it in the engine and have a feel for like the layout and how it flows in a sense. At this point, like we don't have any story. It really is more about like in the environment, walking around and getting a general idea of the land, what spaces we're using, and sometimes it can inspire us for modifications upon the thing. But it's also good just to show once we go into mocap, like where it actually takes place. When we're doing the actual script writing, we can sit down with Corey and show like this is where it is. Like it's not out in the desert. It's actually like in the port of Boston. So it just helps us to visualize where these things happen.
So now that I've started writing and the mission designers have started designing, we start spending a lot of time together. And my days shift over to meeting and hanging out and talking to people, going through my ideas for the script, their ideas for the mission, and as Fizz has created here, you see this little circle. So I spend most of my daytime hours meeting either with Fizz directly or with the various mission designers that have been assigned to the missions in the game, discussing what they're working on, sharing what I'm working on to make sure that both the mission design documents and my script, reflect a mutual understanding between our two groups. And this is really critical because it's, our firm belief that while the writers are obviously the storytellers in the game, so are the mission designers. I firmly believe that mission design is a form of storytelling and narrative. I think that their contribution to the narrative is equal to, and in many cases surpasses, my own. I create words and they build entire worlds. And they spend long, very painful hours having to deal with both the technology and me. I'm not an easy person to work with all of the time, as you may or may not have heard. But, it's how it goes. So
for us, also at this point, like it is a really, really critical period where that iteration, that discussion between us, like it needs to happen, and we need to be as precise as possible to avoid any potential diversions from our original track, where if we didn't have this communication, we would probably end up having a script and a game that didn't match up. Yeah. So this is really, really important that we set that bond so that we don't end up with unforeseen clusterfucks.
So this is my favorite slide, actually, because it puts to rest a myth that I think exists in video game land, that sometimes there are productions where story drives the narrative to the point of damaging mission design. But this will hopefully show you how we do this exactly. I take the mission design documents that have been created at this point, I copy them, and I paste them into our proprietary script writing software, which is something called Oasis. And every line of the mission design document becomes a part of the script, whether it informs a slug line or describes the action or creates the context. It is the skeleton and the backbone that I work off of. So literally, this mission design document that is created by mission designers is copied and broken down inside Oasis accordingly, and then filled in. So this is, in my mind, the ultimate expression of our collaboration, that the final script for the game is an amalgam of both my own writing and the creation of the mission designer. It is really a document that is the product of intense collaboration and cooperation between two different departments.
And on our side at this point, we'll start actually putting the features into the game. So initially we had a skeleton, which was, in a sense, almost a throwaway, because we know it's hacked. We know the basis of it is probably not going to be used in its final form. We're going to replace it with official tech and official features. So at this point, we start getting that stuff in. But on their point of view, we actually start taking in lines that Corey wrote and putting them into the game as debug text, just so we have a better idea, once again, of like how the story flows, what is the story being told, and we can already sort of spot check for things that don't make sense at this level. And we'll also start at this point reviewing the script that Corey wrote, just to make sure, once again, that everything is aligned and there are no unforeseen problems that can arise from this. Everything is grounded in the world and not like in some magical land.
So, as Fizz was saying, we have a come to Jesus moment where we gather in a room. It's me, him, our creative director, Alex Hutchinson, I think, is in this room even also. Cinematics, lead scripter, usually production manager of some point, some type, and we go through the script literally line by line. We read through every single word that is on paper and build a giant database that breaks it down into practical numbers and statistics. So for example, you will see we time the duration of every scene, whether it's a cinematic or a scripted event, and then we also assign it a quality sort of modifier. So if you have tons of people setting off lots of explosions and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, it's obviously marked H for high. If it's two guys talking for 10 seconds about a mission objective being updated, it's an L for low. Different missions and scenes get assigned to different people, and this sort of breaks down the entire thing. Other stuff will occur during this meeting. There will be perhaps slight tweaks to dialogue. We will oftentimes shorten scenes tremendously. A lot of debate and discussion. But again, it's all done in the spirit of collaboration. I'd like to think that I'm not too difficult during these meetings. I will make my case, but I always will defer to my peers because at the end of the day, they know this a lot better than I do.
As long as we give Corey a lot of beer, we're fine.
Yes, usually as long as there's some sort of alcohol to consume at the end of the day.
It can be gas station sangria and it still works.
That's the best. We'll tell you the secret of that later. So as this slide will show you, we will come out of these meetings and, in this instance, the scene on the left got shortened down pretty much to that little bit of text right on the right-hand side. So we will go through things and we will trim fat and we will look for places to be more efficient, to find a way to get our point across in a couple of lines rather than in 120 seconds of me being self-important and having the characters chew the scenery for even longer than I already have them do it. And at the same time, I guess Fizz is doing some stuff as well. Yeah,
on our side, actually, what comes out of that review, we sometimes actually cut missions from the output of this, where we just realized that story didn't make sense at all. So we'll cut missions to things that are much smaller, where instead of going to the port, you'll go to the docks. Or instead of one guy saying this, we'll cut one portion of the mission. So little tweaks like that will come out of a meeting of the sort.
So around this time, once we've come out of those meetings, we have what we consider locked scripts, and they will start to go and get motion captured and localized. And essentially what's happening at this stage is that once the scripts are done, data is being created. And because of the way that performance capture technology works, you need to get in front of this. It's not a matter of bringing some people into a recording booth anymore, having them rattle off a couple of lines and have it be in the game a couple days later. It's a very intense process with lots and lots of people working very, very hard for many, many hours to turn, the couple of actors on a stage over there into these virtual actors doing all sorts of insane stuff inside of our games. So this just gives you sort of a brief overview of also just how many languages our game winds up getting localized into, and that's just a small sampling of them. So again, all this is data that takes a very long time to generate, and so once this, the sooner we can get this stuff done, the better. And a lot of times what will happen is that the script reviews will be rolling, and we'll try and go in chronological order, and for example, we'll finish up sequence 1, it'll get shipped out so that data can start getting collected. And then once all the data is collected, it starts getting integrated.
So on our side, we start, we're integrating all the features at this point, and we start getting in the cinematics from the mocap studio. So our scripters are actually going to take initially what were template scenes and then fill them in with actual mocap data. Some surprises happen. It's never a perfect process. So sometimes at this point, we'll have to adapt to what has been mocap because everything is frozen. We don't have time to redo it. So on the mission side and on the scripting side, we actually we're the ones who have to be flexible at this point, where we'll adapt to what's there, to the data. We'll do a couple things like splicing lines in and out of dialogue just so that the mission actually makes sense. So if like there was a misunderstanding about like the location of something, we just might cut when they actually say where the location is and then have that just pop up like in an objective text instead. But things like that will happen at this
There's
point.
a small amount of room for what we basically consider pickups, but we try and reserve those for mission critical or emergencies only. Otherwise, we would open up the floodgates to making the game twice. Now, this is pretty much where the bulk of my work, at least on the narrative side, ends. Once things have been captured, there's not much that can be done. There's a lot of tech stuff, whether it's working with Danny and Kerry, for example, on AC3 on the Animus database, or looking over a lot of the AFS entries, the tutorial text, or working with the guys putting together strategy guides, stuff like that. But at this point, as the game enters polish and debug phase, there's not a ton of stuff that I can do. There's a ton of stuff I'd like to do, but not always a ton of stuff that I can do.
Usually at this point, like Corey's role is mainly going to be the guardian of truth, where with all of our splices, all the cuts that we can make, sometimes because of production realities, like you don't cut necessarily at the right place, and Corey will just bitch at
Yeah,
moan
so
at us
I'll try and play through sections of the game and talk to people about finding ways to tweak things or clean things up, or make scenes read a little bit better, sound a little bit better, where and when possible. And then what happens after that is pretty much the other guys finish what they're doing and they ship the game. Obviously, it's not quite so simple because there's several more months of production. But as far as at least the work that Fizz and I have been doing together, we ramp down as those guys ramp up.
Or at this point, like we both become guardians of truth.
Yeah,
we just want to make sure that it ships and it's an original intent and hope for the best.
We play through builds and try and fix anything we can at that point.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Sadly, we don't have time for a Q&A session. Forgot to mention that at the beginning. We didn't have the time. But we'd like to thank you all. If you have any questions, we'll be around here all week. Our email addresses are down there. You can also respond to any questions. And just last special thanks to our mission designers and our writers for all the hard work they did for us.
And thanks to all of you for showing up today.
Okay, so they can